Welcome to my first 001 definition of Grasshopper, looking at nodes, and it'll set the tone for this series. And you'll just have to watch it throughout the 5 minutes and see if you can tolerate how my mind works, and maybe it'll be encouraging to some of you, for those that have been watching Michael Wickerson on YouTube for the last little while. Anyway, I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to show you basically what we're going to do. That said, I will take any big geometry that I have, which is none. I will zoom into the first part of the script. We're only going to cover the containers, point, vector, and circle. And don't let those little jump tools confuse you. They're just... and I want to talk about a little bit about what I'm using here, which is this Bifocal plugin. And the reason that's happening, you're getting jumbled up. You're learning what all the nodes are. And I put it on after the fact. But that is a nice one to have, whether you activate it or not. If I deactivated that, it's one I use quite often, disable. You can see you're not going to get any names above it. Actually, I must have two in there. I use it all the time whenever I have to remember what the nodes are doing. So preview on, enable. It basically puts in the names of each node as it's there. And I'm using the same, so that's the first plugin I want to do on this one when talking about point, vector, and circle. And of course, I'm using these little eyes to zoom around and see things. And hopefully we can fly, and I'll show you how complicated these things can get really quickly. And that's why it is such a creative exercise. Grasshopper is for the artist. What could they do? So let's just start with, I don't want to ever be taking a point and putting it in here and putting that into a container. I don't want to depend on 3DM files, not in this set. So I don't even want to ever have that happen. So let's delete that when it's there. A way to make a point is pretty simple. Construct a point in the vector section. Go in and make a point. Set your XYZ attributes to it, and you have a point. And where is it? Well, it's around here somewhere. There it is. And we can move it, and we can play with it virtually, and then we can bake it whenever we want. You can see what I end up doing with the bake with another plugin in this. Simple enough. Point done, but that's the way I would suggest making a point. Let's do the same thing for vector. Believe me, this is going to get a little complicated pretty quick. The vector can be built off of, it's not going to show anything when you make it, but it's going to be a direction with magnitude. And that's basically what you have to construct. So instead of pulling in a vector, somehow making one, which is not even visual anyhow, in Rhino, how would you end up doing that? You've got to basically take it, and I've amplified it through a vector display. And there it is. It has my original point as its anchor, and the vector I've generated, which I have the same control over I had with the point. But don't confuse points for vectors at all, especially in the vector tab when it comes to constructing and not constructing them. I also set an amplitude on there, because if you don't, you get a unit vector or something at once. So you might want to see what that arrow does. So that's it. Circle. How simple is it to make a circle? Don't underestimate the power of your mind. Change the plane, make a circle from the curves menu. I see this used so much, all these objects, but you're already so complicated in there. What would you have done? Why couldn't you have made a circle from points? Why couldn't you have written a script that did that? So when you end up, you have a much more interesting circle. I got lost in trying to figure out how to do that. And in getting lost, you discover an awful lot in Grasshopper. And here's the power of it. I'm glad you stuck around 3 minutes to get to this point. You build a series. I build a series of points right here. And I was thinking, well, that's a way to build a circle. I'll bring in my, and I'll just take this out as a series, put it in the Y. You'll see I have my reference to my sine curve, and I could interpolate that and draw a line between it. I have reference to my cosine curve, which is off in this direction. I figured, well, what if I could bring those 2 points together and deal with that the X and Y are here and here. Now, what is that telling me geometrically? What is going on there? I'm going to take these little guys off because I baked them, and you'll see what I'm doing. I can kind of see a circle, and I can generate it with points. But because it's generating not in order around here, it's not how you would probably make. You might say, well, how is he doing that, and why is geometry being baked while he does that? And that's pretty interesting for me, because I'm actually running a script in another plugin while that happens. And what I would say before we get into this nastiness, this wild trail off into the recesses of my head, I took those points and I said, well, I'll just throw them into a NURBS curve and make this cool pattern. And that's something I could pipe and have this really weird geometry. So I thought that was kind of cool. I could change the radius of that and alter what that was, no problem. it'll take a little bit of time because it's actually a 323 millisecond script to push around. And actually, I think it'll go right to 0, then 0.1. So I'm just going to leave it. I also thought, well, what's the sort list tool? That doesn't really make sense to me in the sets menu. Like every time I go there, I'm like, how am I going to end up using these weird two functions, this index item and the sort list? Well, I figured out how to play around with that enough that if that's the geometry coming out of that and I start to sort the list in other ways, then I end up with different geometry. So if I pull that into curves, I'm going to have this other kind of form. And that's a lot of points and lines on there, so it's not really that interesting to look at. So if I reduce this count down here to something, and it's going to bake those other lines again, if I reduce it down to something like 30, then you're going to get geometry that you can kind of cap and think about and generate this kind of strange stuff. I did bake some things while that happened. You may wonder why that's happening. So what I did was I went in and I said, listen, I want to take these points. I want to know the length of those points. And there's a problem with this Hoopsnake. It's the thing that first got me thinking iterations, which are so essential in coding. Take the feedback of this in a number, starting at whatever you want at 0, and then record those numbers in the feedback history, use that data, and set. And I was having trouble with grabbing the list item count here and putting this. It's weird. I can take, and this is a problem with my Hoopsnake version, a bug, and you'll discover bugs in other people's applications. And maybe this is an older version, but basically I can't put this number in there. But I can put this number in directly from here. This number looks exactly the same as that number, list length, if I set it to 30. So if I did that. But it doesn't take it there. So basically I have to have a reminder in my script. There's a little thing I have to make note of. And this is where you run into problems and what would you do with it. So I know it's 30. So in that point system, so I can actually take this count and set it to 30. And I have to do that every time, which is not a very good code, which is why I'm going to go on to the anonymy script. But basically, that's it. And as I click this, I can actually stop, clear the script, and run it. And when I run it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this off for a second. I'm going to, it's a third kind of, and we're going 7 minutes in. It's a third plugin that I've had, Bifocals Hoopsnake. As I run Hoopsnake, you'll see, and this is kind of in the way, but you'll see, and I baked some geometry, what is happening. Of course, I have to visualize something for you to do that. I'm going to show you what I've done. I've taken, and this is where it's, that's why I have so many screens. I'm grabbing a point system. I'm taking a point list of that, and I'm taking another one with another index, so I get 2 different points at all time, and I can draw a line between them. So I'm generating these strange lines, but as it loops through, and I run this script, you can watch those lines jump around. So as I hit play on this, or go, you'll see that that line's jumping like that. And I thought, well, I want to record that. I want to have that as data. I want to make geometry from that. So I'm trying to say right off the bat, you're thinking circle, you're learning these params, look at the plugins, watch a lot of videos, and all of a sudden you're probably the first person to bring Bifocals, Hoopsnake, and the object bake as the only 3 nodes into learning simple params. So when I activate this and I hit enable, now I can take that geometry which was baking a single iteration, and I can run my Hoopsnake, and all these I don't have param viewers, but I have panels to discuss it, is I have an ability to take these as objects, which are fairly interesting. I'm just going to show you where you can go with this. Run that script as I zoom out and hit bake, and there you go. I've just baked a bunch of geometries. And in doing so, well, those geometries could be referenced as lines, so I could go back and take them. This is where I'm not in the habit of baking lines into Grasshopper. There they were. And the problem with lines are you have to pick what they are. So I'm going to go on and just pick something like geometry, and that's a little easier. I can actually select this geometry, and line has a weird bug too, that it doesn't let you just grab stuff like that and make it into the Grasshopper script. So now I can get rid of these lines that I can't see. So this isn't what all my scripts are going to be like, but that's really what they're for. They're kind of to inspire. So if I grab that little tool and I say, no, I want to take these in the line, that's what I've generated from the script. And that's what I've generated from baking. So the same thing goes. You'd have to bake it again, and you'd have to put it in. But what if I changed up the code and changed these numbers and moved them from this point index and said, listen, I'm not going to start with that point into this index. I'm going to make that index expression, and this is getting to double screen. So if I go that index and go into expression, and I'm not sure where this is going to go, +2, that's going to give me a different point. And that point is going to be different from this point. So now, when I take in this script and I run it, bang, I'm going to end up with different lines. And they do look similar to what I just had, so I have to play with the numbers a little bit more. But once again, I can grab this set of points. I could grab a new set of geometry. I could grab set multiple points to this, and there we go. And then I could take that into another object. But I have this one that's done maybe something similar, maybe something different, because I haven't played with too high numbers. But that said, that's another one that you can bring in the bake, and now you have a whole other thing of layers on here. I have GH Bake here, which is kind of cool. Oh, I didn't know that came up, and that's a new thing for me. I have GH Bake, so I can GH Bake to that item and make it. So there it is. Got a little GH Baked item that I didn't group, so that's a problem. And that's another thing you want to learn about is obviously you're going to want to group those, and then you can grab that geometry and move it over. And that said, let's go back into this one, see if it did make a difference. Those curves, they look way too similar, almost identical. So I'm not going to use that information as those were the original lines. We could go back in, and I'm just playing this up to 11 minutes. Let's go in here and let's say, well, let's take an expression node. It probably is the same because it's not changing this expression down here. So let's go in and let's add 2 to it and see what that does to the geometry. And let's run that as another tool. Stop and play it. And I'm not getting any bakes on that one, which is strange. I think I knew that from before. So I best just figure out what my script was doing. But that is how, I'm thinking through these kind of examples. And I want to give you examples on that maybe you never would have brought these things together or never thought a circle would lead you down that path of knowing about an iteration on Hoopsnake or Anomaly and knowing that this is buried away. If you hit Control Shift and you can hold down, you'll find out that's over there in Lunchbox. I believe it's Lunchbox. Let's just see. Yeah, I wish I could organize these a little better up here and keep them in order like these first ones and prefer which ones I do. But obviously I was having a little bit of trouble with this, and I'll play with it a little more and see where the script ends up going. But that's the type of exercise these 1001 scripts are going to be like. They're not going to be making anything for you for a client, something you can apply. I mean, you'll have to find a way to apply it. And you will learn these scripts, and you will not take them for granted, and you will generate everything people start giving to you. And those are the minds that I'm thinking. Let's not go to a point without going to the attributes of that, and then let's go to the outcome of that, and what new directions, as this script wanders up here, what does that script become? If that's too chaotic for people, you don't want to watch this series. If it's interesting, and you can imagine what kind of exploration I'm going to end up doing, keep watching. I'll try and keep them a little smaller. But I also learned a Grasshopper from people that made their mistakes as they went. You can tell the difference between a tutorial that's copying one that's right beside them on another screen. And to follow through those tutorials just doesn't make too much sense to me. Have the script out, talk about the problems of what you have, what were the insights into what you wanted to do. I'm obviously thinking a logo, embossing it with an outer range and inner range. But who would have thought making a circle between interpolating these points, which led me to this chaos, would have become the inspiration for using Hoopsnake to generate a whole other insane geometry. So I guess we should wrap up. It'll get you into different expression nodes and things like that. You'll see some tutorials. And yeah, I'm kind of rambling because, this is what it's all about. Play around with it. I'm going to take that script and move it back down to nothing. And we'll bake it again. And I'll find ways of subtly making the changes in there. And I kind of want to hit a nice number on the head. Like what happens if I do this one? Plus 2, probably going to get half the lines. Let's go into there and let's hit the bake and see what happens. And we ended up with half the lines, exactly what I thought I would, by just making it plus 1. So that one, again, you could take that script, you could pop it into this geometry, set all geometries, move it into your radius curve, and there's your second logo. And that's where things get fun. So I know I'm yelling, and I'm not sure why. Let's just go in here and grab a render and see what we have. And of course, I didn't take that one to bake, so I don't have anything. And you're going to get in the habit of seeing me constantly. You want to group these, pull these out again and again, and there's your 2 little geometries that made a difference. They could be capped and then booleaned into another circle. All right, thanks for watching.